COVID-19 is not the first pandemic the world has faced. Man, what a strange year. Schools and offices closed, everybody locked inside their homes to minimize social interaction. Who would have thought? Well, as it turns out, many actually did.
Over the last 15 years, numerous articles and papers had warned us that a global pandemic involving a new respiratory disease was only a matter of time, and that there could be millions of viruses in the world that are still undiscovered. You see, a pandemic is the worst case scenario one can think of in a civilization, and throughout the history, nothing has killed more human beings than infectious diseases. The human story has been continuously shaped by these epidemics and pandemics, and COVID-19 shows that we haven't come much far.
It wasn't the first, and it won't be the last. So let's take a look at history's most dangerous epidemics and pandemics. What? Did you really think this was the first time humans had to quarantine themselves? Number 1. Black Death or the Bubonic Plague, 1347 to 1351.
It was October 1347. A ship came from Crimea and Asia docked in Messina. Aboard the ship were not only sailors, but rats. The rats who had brought with them the bubonic plague. People who assembled at the harbor were met with an alarming surprise. Most people on board were dead, and those who were still alive were really sick, overflowing with blood and pus all over their bodies. The authorities in panic quickly requested the ships out of the harbor, but it was already too late. Even before the death ships arrived, people in Europe had heard rumors about a great pestilence causing death in trading routes of the Near and Far East.
Indeed, in the early 3040s, the disease has struck China, India, Persia, Syria, and Egypt. The Black Death, as the name suggests, is recognized as one of the deadliest and most widespread pandemic in history.
It could turn the skin and source of the infected person black.
Though, that is not a reason why it is called the Black Death.
In fact, the people of 14th century knew it as the Great Plague or Terrible Death. It was in 16th century that the event was described as a black for the first time, likely symbolizing the Grim Reaper.
Between 30% and 50% of the population of the affected places did not survive the plague, and the disease killed an estimate 25 to 30 million people, almost a third of the continent's population. People who were perfectly healthy when they went to bed at night could be dead by morning.
The disease, caused by bacillus bacteria and carried by fleas on rodents, is now believed to have been originated in Central Asia around 2000 years ago and was taken from there to the Crimea by Mongol warriors and traders, from where, as we already know, it was carried by rats on trading ships sailing from Black Sea.
Doctors at the time had no idea about such microscopic organism, let alone prescribing an effective treatment against them. One helpful strategy could have been to quarantine the affected areas.
But people just fled in panic from wherever a case broke out, unknowingly carrying and spreading the disease, basically lending a helping hand to the rats. Some thought the plague to be supernatural origins, while some connected it to the comet site of 1345 CE. Some even blamed human evils and paraded throughout the cities, whipping themselves to pay for humanity's sins, which they saw as the only way out.
As we have seen with every pandemic, there also comes some superstitious notions of how to get rid of these diseases.
With the Black Death, many people believe that bathing in the rose water and vinegar or burning of aromatic herbs can save them. Suffice to say, it didn't.
The death toll was so high that it would take 200 years for the population of Europe to recover to the previous level. So now question is, how and when did the Black Death end? Well, it never really ended and returned with a vengeance years later. In fact, there are still 1000 to 3000 cases of plague every year.
But officials in the Venetian controlled port city of Ragusa were able to slow its spread to a degree. Ports were controlled and sailors were held on their ships for 30 days.
As time went on, they increased the forced isolation to 40 days or a quarantino, which the origin of the word quarantine. The bacterial infection still occurs and can be treated with antibiotics, but you should still avoid kissing any random rats you find on the ship. Number 2. Spanish Influenza, 1918. The worst global pandemic in modern history.
The flu began to spread around the end of the World War I, as the media in most countries was under heavy military censorship at that time. They did not report on it, but Spain did, giving the impression that Spain was the only country infected, hence the name Spanish influenza.
The disease infected an estimated 500 million people worldwide, about one-third of the planet's population, and claims around 20 to 50 million lives.
The first wave of 1918 pandemic occurred in the spring and was generally mild. Most patients recovered within a few days of getting sick, and the mortality rate was low. But in the fall the same year, a more deadly and more contagious wave of the flu appeared. Victims died within an hour or days of developing the symptoms. Their skin turned blue and their lungs were filled with fluid, suffocating them. A unique characteristic of this infection was its tendency to kill healthy adults between the age of 20 and 40. Nobody knows from where the virus originated from, but it was the first observed in the Europe and China before spreading to the rest of the world within a matter of months.
The doctors were unsure of what caused the disease or how to treat it. Unlike today, there were no antiviral or drugs available at that time that could treat the flu. The virus causing the flu wasn't discovered until 1943, and its genetic sequence wasn't determined until 2005.
Newspaper collected advertisement of miraculous medicines. Some even encouraged people to smoke. Thinking that inhaling smoke killed germs, people picked up on the importance of hygiene education. They also understood that people who were yet to develop the symptoms or were asymptomatic were the greatest source of its spread, and so minimized social interaction and events. Cloth masks were recommended to the people by government and made compulsory for the public service workers. Public places were routinely disinfected. Import and export restrictions were laid out. People moving within the cities were identified. Schools were free to suspend classes, blah blah blah. Basically 2020. And that is how they overcame the virus.
By the summer of 1919, the flu pandemic came to the end, and those that were infected either died or developed immunity.
Darwin would be proud.
Number 3. The plague of Justinian, the beginning of first plague pandemic, the contagious disease caused by bacterium Yersinia pestis.
In the year 540 CE, a fleet of ships left the port of Alexandria for some of the greatest trading cities in the Mediterranean region. The Byzantine Empire, for which it was headed, had for centuries depended on North Africa to meet its requirement of food grain. This time though, along with food grains, came a disease that would wreak havoc across the empire and alter the course of its history. The Byzantine Empire under Justinian I was its pinnacle when the plague broke out. Around 25 million people died, and it was the end of Byzantium.
Procopius, a historian at that time, in his secret history, described victims as suffering from delusions, nightmares, fevers, and swelling on the body. Many victims suffered for days before death, while others died almost immediately.
Procopius recorded that at its peak, the plague was killing 10,000 people in Constantinople daily. But the accuracy of the figure is in a question, and the true number will probably never be known. But researcher estimates that around 25 million people lost their lives. He noted that because there were no room to bury the dead, bodies were left stacked in the open. Funeral rites were often left unattended to, and the entire city smelled like the dead.
Procopius' description of the disease almost certainly confirmed the presence of bubonic plague as the main culprit of the outbreak, though he himself laid blame for the outbreak on the emperor, declaring Justinian to be either devil or that the emperor was being punished by God for his evil ways.
Various treatments were used by people to treat the plague, including cold water baths, powder blessed by saints, magic amulets and rings, and various drugs, especially alkaloids. Needless to say, that did nothing to stop the plague. The outbreak continued to sweep throughout the Mediterranean world for another 225 years, finally disappearing in 750 CE. In 2013, researchers confirmed earlier speculation that the cause of the plague of Justinian was Yersinia pestis, the same bacterium responsible for the Black Death.
Reminding you again to not to kiss random rats on the ship. These tiny rats score more than humans. All three plague pandemics, while they occurred centuries apart, were mainly because of three main reasons:
rising urban population and lack of medical knowledge, making sickness like the plague a mystery.
But humans have come a long way, and the way that we have treated this pandemic, I don't think it would be insensitive to say this is the best pandemic ever. Oh, By the way, gene sequencing from which scientists can gather hereditary data of organism has revealed that the plague originated from China over 2000 years ago. China, man. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you have any feedback, let us know in the comment section below. This occurs because using words such as using words such as zing, using words such as jan. What is the conclusion? Jai Jawan, Jan 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 Jan.